All right, so when you think about the book of First Timothy, you might be picturing some dusty old letter. But I want you to just throw that idea out. Because this book, it's not a dry theological textbook. No way. It's more like an urgent field manual, a survival guide, sent from a seasoned veteran to his young apprentice on a super high-stakes mission. So yeah, let's dive right in.
Because that's exactly the scene we're dropping into. You've got the Apostle Paul, who's basically a master strategist, sending his most trusted guy, this young man named Timothy, straight into the heart of a full-blown crisis. And his mission? It's to restore order to a church that is literally being ripped apart from the inside out. The stakes could not be higher.
Okay, so our mission briefing. The setting is the city of Ephesus, sometime around 62 to 64 AD. And you gotta understand, Ephesus wasn't some quiet little village. Not at all. It was a massive economic and cultural hub. I mean, it was home to the Temple of Artemis, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. This was an influential, powerful, and honestly, a notoriously difficult city. And Timothy, he's walking right into the eye of the storm.
And the thing is, Paul knew this city inside and out. He'd spent 3 really intense years there, and let me tell you, he battled everything from local magic practitioners to a full-on riot kicked off by silversmiths who were furious that their idol-making business was tanking because of the message of Jesus. So when Paul sends Timothy in to clean up this mess, he knows exactly what he's sending him into. This is not a friendly visit. This is a strategic deployment, plain and simple.
You know, right in his opening line, Paul calls Timothy his teknon, his genuine child. And this is so much more than just sentimental language. In the ancient world, that phrase established immediate authority. It's like Paul was saying, this guy carries my spiritual DNA. When he speaks, you're hearing my voice. So this letter isn't just advice, it's Timothy's mission briefing, his official orders.
So what's the threat assessment here? What's the mission's primary target? Well, the core problem was this dangerous spiritual infection that had gotten into the church. You had a group of corrupt leaders who were spreading this toxic version of Christianity, and it was causing absolute chaos.
And this wasn't some vague threat, it was incredibly specific. These guys, they were obsessed with weird speculations about the Torah, twisting stories from Genesis and genealogies into these bizarre, made-up religious systems. They were pushing this really harsh lifestyle, forbidding marriage, saying you can't eat certain foods, and it all sounded super spiritual, but it was actually just denying the goodness of God's creation. But here's the real kicker. The way Timothy could spot the poison. Their teaching wasn't producing love or faith. No, it was just generating controversy and division nonstop. Paul even calls out a couple of them by name, Alexander and Hymenaeus. Now, Paul's counterattack is just brilliant. For sound doctrine, he uses the Greek word hygieino, and this word, it literally means healthy or whole. It's actually where we get our word hygiene. So for Paul, true teaching isn't just about being academically correct. No, it's about being spiritually hygienic. It promotes life, it promotes growth, just like good food nourishes your body. The false teaching, that was a spiritual disease, plain and simple.
He calls their ideas mythos. And we're not talking about harmless little fables here. These were complex, completely fabricated religious systems that sounded really deep and profound, but they actually led nowhere. They were just these elaborate, empty philosophies with zero power to actually change anyone's life. Paul saw them for exactly what they were, ministry killers. They were a total distraction from the simple, powerful truth about Jesus.
Okay, so the operational blueprint. Look, you can't fix a corrupt church without fixing its leadership. It's just not possible. And that's why Paul lays out a crystal clear plan for Timothy, confront the bad leaders, and then appoint a brand new, healthy team to take their place.
And the plan is pretty straightforward. First, Timothy's got to appoint a team of elders, the presbyteros, who also act as overseers, or episkopos. Basically, these two words point to the same role, mature leaders who are going to teach and guide the church. And then, supporting them, you have a team of deacons, which is just a Greek word for servants. And this team included both men and women who would run the various ministries and take care of all the practical needs. So what's the #1 requirement for these leaders? Is it talent, charisma, a booming voice? Nope, not even close. It was character. Paul is absolutely insistent that they have to be above reproach, and, this is huge, well thought of by outsiders. You have to remember, in that Greco-Roman world, public honor and shame were everything. Your reputation was everything. So Paul is saying a church leader's life has to be so solid, so full of integrity, that even the people outside the church, the non-believers, have no choice but to respect them. All right, now this brings us to probably one of the most debated and honestly one of the most difficult passages in all of Paul's letters. This is where he tells Timothy that certain women in the Ephesian church should not teach or have authority over men. So, what on earth is going on here?
While scholars are pretty much split down the middle on this, there are basically two main views. One view says Paul is setting a permanent, universal rule for all churches, for all time, that men should hold the primary teaching authority. But the other view says, hang on, Paul is tackling a very specific, very local problem right there in Ephesus. From the letter, it seems like some wealthy, high-status women who probably didn't have a lot of formal education were not only being disruptive, but they were also falling for and spreading this false teaching. So in this interpretation, Paul isn't silencing all women for all time, but these specific women in this specific situation, basically telling them, hey, you need to sit down and learn the healthy doctrine first before you can even think about leading.
But here's the thing. Whichever view you lean towards, Paul's ultimate goal is the same: mature, healthy leadership for everyone. And his entire vision, the perfect antidote to all the bad teaching and the broken leadership, it all gets summed up in this one beautiful, ancient Christian poem he includes.
And listen, this isn't just some doctrinal checklist to memorize. This is the theological heartbeat of the entire letter. Paul holds up this hymn as the pattern for what true leadership looks like. It's about embodying the humility of Jesus, being manifested in the flesh. It's about trusting God's plan, getting on board with a global mission, and at the end of the day, making sure everything points back to Jesus' glory. See, true leadership isn't about grabbing personal power. It's about retelling the story of Jesus with your own life.
So from this big, beautiful vision, we zoom right back into the messy, on-the-ground reality. Paul starts giving Timothy very practical, tactical advice for dealing with the real-world, superhuman problems that were popping up all over the church.
He hits on a few key issues that were really hurting the church's reputation in the city. First up, the widow's ministry was being totally exploited. You had some younger, wealthy widows getting on the list for financial support and then using all their free time to spread gossip and the false teachings. So Paul's solution is super practical. Only support the truly needy older widows who have a great reputation. Okay, next problem. Some of the older men were misbehaving and tarnishing the church's name. Timothy's job? Confront them. Respectfully, sure, but also firmly. And then there was this really tricky situation with Christian slaves who were kind of flexing their new freedom in Christ by disrespecting their Christian masters. Paul's advice was really strategic. Live out the equality of the gospel, but do it in a way that doesn't cause a massive social uproar and ruin your witness.
And then, right in the middle of all this heavy, serious instruction, you get this wonderfully human moment. Paul just tells Timothy to stop drinking all the water and to drink a little wine for your stomach's sake. It's this little aside that shows us the stress of this mission was literally making Timothy sick to his stomach. It's such a real, poignant reminder of the physical and emotional toll this kind of work takes, and it just shows you how much Paul cared for him, like a father. All right, so finally, Paul circles right back to those corrupt teachers. He's about to expose their real motivation and deliver his prime directive, the one single value that should guide Timothy and the entire church from here on out.
And here's the part that is just shockingly modern. Why were these teachers causing all this trouble? What was their core motive? It was money. That's it. They saw religion as a way to get rich. They were charging crazy high rates for their teaching and were just trying to build a following for their own financial gain. They had literally turned spirituality into a business model.
Paul's response is just a direct assault on that entire mindset. He declares that the real gain, the real profit, isn't wealth. It's godliness with contentment. And then he drops one of the most famous and most misquoted lines in the entire Bible. Not that money is evil, but that the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. I mean, what a radical idea, to find your wealth not in what you can pile up, but in what you can give away. Okay, so let's debrief. Why does this ancient letter, this survival guide from almost 2,000 years ago, still matter so much today? Well, it's because while the hairstyles and the clothes have changed, the core challenges facing the church, they are absolutely timeless.
Think about it. Paul's vision was for faithful leaders who were defined by their proven character, people who were respected even by outsiders and whose whole goal was love from a pure heart. Now, what do we so often see today? We see the celebrity pastor era. We value charismatic leaders with massive platforms. We've got this metrics-obsessed, hustle culture approach to ministry that honestly looks more like a tech startup than a humble community of faith. Paul's letter is just a direct, urgent challenge to all of that.
And really, it all boils down to this one idea, the very heart of Paul's mission for Timothy. The church doesn't need more celebrities. It doesn't need more influencers or more impressive leaders on bigger stages. It just needs more faithful ones, people whose character, not their charisma, is what points everyone else to Jesus.
And that really just leaves us with a critical question for our own time, doesn't it? In an age that is just completely obsessed with influence, with platforms, with personal brands, what does simple, quiet, character-driven faithfulness actually look like? That's the challenge of 1 Timothy, and is just as urgent for us today as it was for Timothy back in ancient Ephesus.